hear that tune and it doesn't take you to a certain place, time in front of a TV set, then you know that you're way too young. Way too young, because that is the kind of music that I think a lot of us actually grew up listening to, especially if you watched Seven Delan. And that really is the story that forms the context for our next conversations. Fans of the Afrikaans soapie have been holding pickets and protesting, in particular against the SABC's decision to drop the long-running story. Now, the public broadcaster citing financial reasons for why it cannot continue the run of Seven Delan. And it's not the first time that we've seen how fans react, particularly when things do not turn out at least the way that we would want. This morning, we're going to try and understand this culture of super fanatism, really. Where does it come from? How do we begin to make sense of it? What would push a young man to travel all the way from Cape Town to Johannesburg to hand over a petition to the public broadcaster to say, I demand that you reinstate the soapie series? That's the conversation we'll have in this hour. Let me welcome onto the show in studio with me, Phil Mpela. He's an entertainment commentator. You may see his tweets on social media. Well, are they still tweets?
Yeah, they're still tweets.
His
Hey.
exes, you might see. You may have seen his exes, but mostly focusing on the entertainment industry. He's always got all of the latest news and a bit of gossip somewhere there. Bronwyn Williams is a partner at Flux Trends. Bronwyn, good morning. Hello, Bronwyn.
Yes, good morning.
Oh, there we go. Great to have you on the line. And Jermaine Christians is the founder of the Seven Delan May Know fan base. And he's, of course, been able to build a supportive community. Over 500,000 followers. Jermaine, good morning.
Good morning, Kathy. Good morning, SFM listeners. Bronwyn and Mr. And Phil, sorry.
Sure.
If I say his name correctly.
Yeah, you did say it correctly. No problem, Jermaine. So Jermaine, I think the first thing to start is perhaps for you to help us understand how you moved from just watching a soapie, like any other soapie on TV, to the point where you are now publicly advocating for the continued stay of the series. What does Seven Delan mean to you? Where did this relationship begin?
So, Kathy, the relationship began back in 2015 when I started Seven Line Mano, which is the fan page, like you said, on Facebook. And it has grown with over 500,000 fans that feel the same way regarding the soapie. So I've got a great love for the industry, and my dream is still to be within the industry, you know, and become an actor. So I think that's where the love started. Back then, as a little boy, I remember always telling my family that I can just get in at the back of the, you know, those box TVs, which is no longer really in existence, and then I'm going to be on the show and I can come back home. So that's where the love started for this specific soapie. And yeah, and that's why I'm advocating for Seven Line to remain on air, you know. And then over some time, I grew a relationship with some of the actors in the soapie in 2019 with COVID-19. I approached some of them on social media, asked them to do lives on our Facebook platform to interact with the people, you know, seeing that they've got more time on their hands, not being at studio or at work. And the love for the soapie just grew even more, you know, because of the welcoming personalities and the fact that they include us as fans, you know, and make us part of the storylines and everything else. And then I have thankfully got to meet them when they came to shot in Cape Town back in 2021. And I was totally blown away because then I had the privilege of then being the dominee that married Connie and Andre, you know, two of the actors. So really, it's been a journey. And after that's where it all started back in 2015.
Jermaine, you sound incredibly committed, but it also seems like a lot of hard work. What are you having to sacrifice to put in all the hours of maintaining this communication, of running those lives on Instagram? I mean, when you're taking up the content, right, and just seeing it on social media, it all looks easy, but the reality is that there's a lot of logistics and planning behind the scenes.
Definitely, it's not that easy. Luckily I've got a great team behind me. I'm not the only one. I've got, specifically for the hashtag Save Seven Line campaign, I've got Joel Matthews and then Caitlin Y. And then we are basically a group of 10 to 15 administrators that works on content and, every evening trying to keep the people entertained and informed. And especially now with this campaign running, it's been hectic, but it's rewarding in the sense of it helps me personally. It helps me to grow. I've never been this outspoken before. I've been, but not to this extent.
Yeah.
And it really helps a lot. I've really grown ever since 2015 up until today.
And
So, yes.
do you consider yourself a super fan, Jermaine?
I wouldn't really. Yes, maybe I am based on what I
Maybe.
put out there. But but I definitely, I just consider myself a dedicated viewer, and then someone that is currently advocating, and against the fact that they want to end the show. So SABC wants to end the soapy, and really just advocating for those 120 plus minus people and their jobs at Seventh Line. That's my main concern, and I think because of that, I come across basically recently as a super fan. But definitely, I just have a great love for the soapy, its people, and the industry as a whole.
All right, Jermaine, thank you so much for opening up for us and really laying that context in terms of where you and Seven Delan meet. Phil, this is often something that you see in the States where, people become so involved, especially in programming or with artists, that there's absolutely nothing they wouldn't do to help support their faves, as it's called now. Do we have a culture of super fanatics in South Africa, or is Jermaine really a unicorn? Is he is he there by himself?
Well, we do have that kind of like, super fan culture, but to take it to this level of Jermaine, it's something that is very unique and very impressive. I think with what he has done with the fandom and the fan base of Seven Delan has been something that has been remarkable to watch, because a lot of the time we talk about appreciating the art, we talk about appreciating our celebrities here in South Africa, but it's very rarely that we express it as South Africans or even go to those lengths to show it. So I think he's an exception in a way, and it's beautiful to see. But unfortunately, I feel like by the end of this conversation, the end of this hour, he's not gonna like me.
Why not? Why not?
Because fans sometimes are removed from the reality of the industry, and the reality of the industry is that this is a business, so a lot of what we're going to be talking about today will inevitably lead to the fact that, hey, this is a business. If there's no capital to keep the business going, you cannot just keep the business going because your customers want you to have that store. If you don't have the capital to have the stock in
but
the
Phil,
store.
isn't the argument that ratings basically determine everything?
Yes.
If Jermaine has over 500,000 followers just on this page, where stop it.
yes, go on.
If Jermaine has over 500,000 followers on this page, surely that is translating into viewership. Isn't that what is needed to bring in the money?
At face value, yes, it seems like that, right? But you look at these numbers conservatively, because the reality is, of those 500,000 that are on the page, probably only about maybe 40% are like, the regular viewers, because here's the thing about television, and especially with soapies, right? A lot of the time fans watch per story block. So I will come in because I love a particular story and I will stay for that story. When that ends, then I'm like, I'll come back when something else is interesting. So you'll have a core audience, yes, that will stay regardless of whatever the story is and all of that. So when you're looking at social media, I always say to people that just because a show trends doesn't not mean that people are actually watching that show, because a lot of the time people will communicate simply because other people are, this thing, the kids call it FOMO, kind of thing. But that is not to take away from the fact that Seven the Line has an audience, and I mean, at some point we'll probably be talking about the issue of representation. I think I was expecting that maybe Jermaine would bring that up. That the fact that there's an Afrikaans soapy on SABC, which is accessible to the majority of the television viewers in South Africa because it's linear television. It's not like paid TV. It's important, and it's important to preserve shows like that, to make sure that shows like that don't end up being a once-off kind of thing. For me, Seven the Line is like Mubango. Those are kind of shows that the broadcaster should fight. The brands that buy into the media sales for these shows should actually be cognizant of the fact that these shows are representatives of groups that are not represented widely within the broadcasting spaces. So, yeah.
Bronwyn, let me bring you in here. Your own observation around, super fanatism in a country like South Africa, and I'll put the same question to you. Is Jermaine really, sort of amongst the only ones of fans that are willing to go as far as he has?
Well, I think from my perspective, I'm coming at this from like a trend analyst perspective. It is something that we've been looking at for quite a long time. And this really has its roots in the emergence of what has been overexposed as being the so-called ownership economy. And this is where we're starting to see that whether you're talking about brands and have their customers, or whether you're talking about like celebrities or shows in this case that have their fans, we see more symbiotic two-way relationships developing. And it's very much part of the same sort of really macro trend that social media opened up with us with the advent of so-called Web 2, which really transformed communications. That's why broadcast is such a great example to talk about this. From a one-way, top-down, broadcaster broadcast something and fans were passive, to much more two-way parts of conversation. I mean, we can see this, what's going on with the wars in the moment, and how social media has shaped so much of the discourse and even the politics of what's going on with geopolitical affairs at the moment. So we are not surprised when we start seeing this in more fandom-based relationships, as has been mentioned today. But really, we've got this idea of two-way relationships and how brands and how celebrities and how broadcasters now have to deal with fans as a source of content and as a source of curation and having a source of input into what is created. So it becomes a conversation rather than a broadcast. For instance, standing on a stage and talking to someone and having a conversation with someone. And that's how we've really got to see how fandom is shifting to a much more active space. And I think this is definitely not just a South African phenomenon. It's happening across the world. We have a voice now. We have a voice. And as you said, Jermaine's organized this on social media. This is why all these things tied together. But I think a great example to sort of crack open this conversation and see just how far these two-way relationships have gone, and also to take it away from the more sort of contextual issues that can be a bit controversial in this case, around issues of access and around issues of language and all those sorts of things. I think a great example here is the example of the Taylor Swift fandoms. I mean, we know how much money she's making. We know that like her and Beyonce now make more money than the GDPs of some small countries, which is just extraordinary. But what's really interesting in terms of a trend perspective is Taylor Swift fans have now proposed the creation of a Taylor Swift fan union. Now, this is fans saying not only they want a creative say in the content that their idol produces for them,
Sure.
they're also even suggesting that they should actually get benefits for being fans for the fan work that they do in promoting the person that they adore. They say they should have things like healthcare benefits, for example. They should be supported. They should be paid for contributing. And that's quite an extreme example. And yet, that could be quite satirical. No one's literally like taking Taylor Swift to court and saying, you've got to pay us for being your fans. But it is a great example of the ownership economy, which is what this ties into. And this has its roots in, as I said, social media started the two-way conversation, but the ownership came up with the Web3 conversation, where we had the likes of crypto and we had the likes of NFTs, as silly as they are. Underneath the hype and the mania around Bitcoin and crypto and NFTs is this idea that people that have a stake in something that they are supporting, that someone else is benefiting from, someone else is creating, they're wanting to be compensated for that too. So that was the whole idea of the so-called creator and co-creator economy, whereby using things like, which as I said, NFTs and crypto cracked open this conversation, you could essentially become a shareholder in the projects that you support. Now, this can be a literal in the sort of crypto sense or a more figurative in the case of what Jermaine is doing. He's saying he's not just a passive fan, we're actually stakeholders in this project that we are supporting, in the show that we are supporting, and we're prepared to put work in, but we also want to get something out. So perhaps ways to continue this conversation and sort of tie these things together with some of the other commentators have spoken about today is that we have all these tools available to us in terms of fundraising, in terms of tokenization, in terms of crowdsourcing. And it might be a case of saying, oh, you've got this 500,000 people that want to support the show. Well, how about we sort of put our money where our mouth is, but not in a donor point of view. Why can't we have essentially like fan-based, token-funded public sector broadcasting? That would be a really interesting conversation. Why aren't we making use of these technologies to actualize the social and the technological movements around us? But then, of course, the fans should be compensated, right? If you're contributing, you're essentially being like a micro producer. Why can't we look at sort of distributing the advertising takes and all the various things that come with it, the productization, the merchandisation? I think these are very exciting conversations because they talk to new co-created, co-shared, co-value created and value sharing relationships between citizens, state, between consumer, between brand, whatever it is we're looking at.
So one of the concerns that I have is that it sounds to me that a lot more pressure then is being put on individuals that have fans, and I know it's across the board, so that's why I don't want to say artists, because you'll have politicians that have fans, you'll have sporting artists, sportsmen and women that have these fans, but surely where does that leave room for the individual to still exist as what they are? Because the reason you say you are a fan of Serena Williams is because she is a top tennis player. But to now expect her to wear the shoes that you suggest she wears or have an outfit that she plays in, is that not eroding this person's own independence? And how do you find that stars are managing those expectations, which is really what they are, expectations of them?
Of course, there's a trade-off there, but I think that the big sort of elephant in the room in that conversation is that these celebrities are reflective of societal Matthew effects and winner-takes-all effects. They have outsized rewards in terms of inequalities of power and wealth. We do know that. We know that at a deep level that the big celebrities have huge wealth compared to their fans. They have huge power compared to their fans. And they are beneficiaries not just because of their talent, but also there's luck involved with that too. We know this is the way the world works in terms of endowments of talent and money and access to power and privilege. So I think that conversation could go two ways. I think what people are really asking for is a fairer distribution of rewards that come from essentially being in a community. I think what's important to realize is that you cannot be famous, you cannot be a celebrity without your fans. And that's what the last few years, this is what the Web3 conversation, the ownership economy conversation, the fandom conversation has been about at a deeper level. This idea of wanting to share, not just in the reflected glory from the stage, but actually to be part of the rewards that you're contributing towards. The sense that nobody can do this alone. You can't be famous by yourself. You have to have fans to go along with you. But yes, of course, it comes with the trade-off. And yes, of course, there are boundaries and lines. But what I'm interested in from a sort of futures perspective and a more practical perspective is how we are seeing celebrities portioning off certain parts of their fandom to share with their fans. So as I said, NFTs were the shallow end of the pool there, but we're seeing all these sort of much more co-created collaborative campaigns now that are layering on things like, including things like virtual reality and collaborations with like virtual fashion where fans can get involved with designing objects that can then be bought and sold and then also share the profits of where their creative contribution has come in. And we're seeing more and more of these projects. Again, this is still early days, but we're going to see more of that.
All right. We'll continue the conversation in a moment. You heard the voice there of Bronwyn Williams. Jermaine Christians, who is the founder of the Seven Delan May Know, really our case study for this morning, is still on the line, and Phil Mpela is in studio. We'll continue in a moment. It's time 30, time for your latest news.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. We're looking at super fan culture. I wonder, How far have you gone? What is it that you would be willing to do to show just how much you love your idol as it is? That's why the entire show was conceptualized, right? American Idol. Who is your idol? And how far would you go really in being a fan? What do you make of somebody like Jermaine and the great effort that he has gone to support his beloved Soapy? Joining us for this conversation is Jermaine Christians. He is the Seven Delan Mayno leader, if I can put it as that, in inverted commas. He started the fan page in 2015. Bronwyn Williams is partner at Flux Trends, and Phil Mpela is an entertainment commentator. Phil, I want to build on this idea that Bronwyn has put forward around co-creating.
Yeah.
That fans want to feel that they have a stake in whatever it is that is being done. Now, you see this a lot with soccer fans, right? If the team loses, everybody has a say on who they think should play, who doesn't deserve to be in the team, etc., etc. It seems to me that there was a point where that could be ignored without social media. Social media has made it difficult because even your fans will drag you if they feel that you are not listening to what they have to say.
Yeah, but now that in itself also comes with the issue of not everybody, art is subjective, right? So not everybody's gonna like the same thing.
Yes.
So now who do you listen to? Because the fans are probably a spectrum of fans. So who do you listen to and who do you ignore, even in that context? You know what I mean? So it's a difficult one, and I would imagine that producers, have a hard time in terms of trying to appease, the fan base, whatever. But I always say, there's nothing wrong with investing in appreciating somebody's art. However, there's also an element of artistic integrity that you have to respect. I loved Paula on Seven Delan, but I understood that dear Lawrenson had to move on and go do other things as an actress, right? So now, as a fan of the show and as a fan of Paula, do I now sit and now protest that, no, Diane, what are you doing? Stop your life and come back to the show.
I was so upset when they wrote her out. I was so upset. I think that's probably closer to when I stopped watching the show.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying. So it's that element, and also, I mean, these shows have to evolve, with the time. I mean, Jermaine only started watching the show at 2015. There were people who are watching it as far back as 2002. So there's an evolvement that has to happen, and unfortunately, that evolvement comes with some having to lose certain things, and fans have to understand Seven Delan could actually be a catalyst for more things. There could be a spin-off. The characters that they love on Seven Delan could actually get a spin-off. They could be advocating for, okay, fine. You can maintain, the resources that comes with actually putting on this show. Hey, how about we do a series with our faves? So there are many other things that fans can be involved in terms of being co-creators, to make sure that, the show's legacy lives on.
One of the other things that I've seen, just talking about, the increasing pressure that there is on, celebrities, people that are in the public eye, that have fans, is that when it comes to social media, more and more, you're seeing a pressure for people to actually engage.
Yeah.
Not just engage in terms of putting posts out there about themselves, maybe about aspects of their lives, but people will hold Instagram lives, they'll hold X spaces, etc., etc. Where is that coming from? What is it? The fan culture that's driving that? Do you believe?
But here's the reality, though, Katie. This existed for as long as we've had stars.
Really? In what ways? In what ways?
Write letters.
Yes.
I mean the extreme and the set, side of it is when you've had people like that Hinckley guy who shot Reagan because he was a fan. He was trying to impress Jodie Foster.
Yes.
You've got that. There's a wonderful documentary on Netflix right now about this British journalist who was murdered outside of her house by a fanatic. So it's always been there. This thing. just because I like what you do, I have, ownership in your life and what you curate. So it's always been there. Just that right now, we've got platforms where these friends can actually articulate it, which in a way is a good thing, because now nobody feels the need to come to your workplace, Katie,
Yes.
to kind of interact with you. Now they can just interact with you via social media. At least there's that boundary, and then your safety can at least, be protected there. But it's always been there. It's not a new thing. Fans have always been there. I mean, in America, for instance, when I was growing up, I used to, know of these fan groups that, people would have around musicians and whatever. And so,
And those still exist.
and they still exist in a
Those
way.
still exist.
So people think that the Swifties and the beehives, whatever, it's a new thing. No, it's not. It's always been there.
Jermaine, I want to come back to you. What would you say it actually costs you to be a super fan? Because you're not getting paid for any of this work, are you? You and the 10 to 15 administrators that are running the campaign, that are running the social media pages, do you derive any financial benefit from it?
Kitty, no, nothing at all, And that's the thing, we don't want to be, remunerated for what we are doing. We're simply just asking to keep the show on air because it speaks to us. It's this cultural diversity, There's the language thing, whereas there's many languages covered within the soapy. And you don't get this on national television any longer, And then Phil mentioned that, money could be an issue, or like the SABC say that is the main reason why they're ending the show. So now I asked myself the question, and I asked the SABC these questions. They haven't responded yet, though. They're not good at responding. And then I asked these questions such as, what did the SABC do to bring in funding? Because surely, because it's an iconic soapy, many people would be interested in investing. And then another factor is the corruption at the SABC. Everybody knows that the SABC, there's lots going on there. It's in the news every week. So now, because of that, people do not want to invest because the show is affiliated with the SABC. So what have they done, in order to bring in the necessary money? I mean, the recent stats, it shows that 1.2 million views. I mean, now what did the marketing team do, to get people on board? Where's the sponsors? I asked all these questions, despite load shedding and all those socioeconomic issues and things we are dealing with in South Africa. The numbers still remain. It still remains constant in terms of people are still tuning in, and it's still the second most watched soapy on SABC. So how come you take away 7 lines specifically and not something else that doesn't bring in any money at all? So it's just a matter of
Jermaine,
how do they even. Yes.
Are you at all willing to contend with what Phil said earlier on, that TV programs, in the way that stars do, almost have a lifespan? They have a life cycle, and it becomes part of the inevitable aspect of the industry, that change will come, that you're never going to have a program that runs in perpetuity, really.
Yes. No, I totally understand that. I get that. But now I ask myself the question, why is it that it has to come to an end in this way specifically, They said it's financial issues and whatsoever. Suggestions were made. We've communicated with them. We've brought a lot of things to the table that we can do as a fan base. I think it was Bronwyn that mentioned, why don't the fans, almost like create terms of a community and then gather the funds that the SABC needs? We suggested lots of things, but nothing gets responded on, So now I ask myself the question, is it really funding or is it something else? So they also mentioned that Afrikaans could be part of the problem. So now then why the language specifically? So then it tells me that it's not the funding alone, that there's lots going on in the background that we're not aware of as fans. And that is actually why we are against the fact that they are bringing the soapy to an end,
All right. Phil, I'll take your comment in a moment. I know you want to come in. I'll take your calls as our listeners on 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial to the studio line, 086 000 2032. What do you make of super fans, and who are some of your favorite super fans? Already in the open line, we had lots of people speaking about Mama Joy, who's a soccer or a sport super fan. She's now traveling the world, from one game to the other. She's no longer just a soccer super fan, but a sport super fan, and that's how she's branded herself. What do you make of that, Phil?
Okay, so let's start with the Jermaine situation, right? I feel bad having to put this on, because I understand his frustration, and I actually believe that representation on the public broadcaster is very important. But sometimes, guys, there are no conspiracy theories and all. Sometimes it's just a practical reason. We were all sad when Isidingo went off air, because we loved Isidingo, and I mean at the time it was the number one show on SABC3. You get what I'm saying? But business-wise, it did not make sense for the broadcaster to continue with the show because of the cost and whatever. And I don't know if Jermaine is aware of what had happened a couple of months ago, where the production on Seven Line had to be halted simply because there were issues with money. So now Danny Odendaal Productions is a company that needs to make a revenue. Danny Odendaal is now responsible to the livelihood of the crew and the actors on Sievendelan. So now it costs millions to put on a show like Sievendelan. I bet you even if the fans were to donate, 1,000 rand each, it would not carry a show for more than 2 months or 3 months. You get what I'm saying? So the reality is, if you continue to keep the show on air simply because of novelty, what will happen is that we have a situation now where we're going to be having stories and stories where actors of the show and the crew are complaining that they're not getting paid and not being able to feed their families. So that is the reality, and I feel like, super fans have to understand that, and I'm glad that you asked that question, Jorge. Are you willing to contend with the fact that the show has a lifespan, at some point it has to end, for whatever reason? So I don't think that we should dwell too much on the issue of thinking, Jorge, there's this malicious, conspiracy around the SABC to kind of do away with Seven Line. I'm sure SABC would love to keep Seven Line because it's, a big show, and it's also a competitive show when it comes to, the language of Afrikaans and the demographic of Afrikaans. Because why would they want to, sabotage Seven Line that is competitive with your Kicknet and whatever? They would not do that. It does not make business sense. So yeah, on Mama Joy, I think that is a beautiful thing. And that's where we look at when being a fan. I mean, I started off as a fan of the industry. I'm not a journalist. People think that I'm a journalist. I'm not a journalist. I started off as a blogger simply because I was a fan of the industry.
Are these your confessions?
Hey, let's not go there. Let's not go there.
Who were you stalking, and where were you stalking them?
Yeah, so you see, as a kid growing up in Northwest, I was a fan. I was not an active child, so I was not in the streets and whatever, So watching television was, my thing. I grew to love the industry and want to be part of the industry because I was a fan of the industry. I do what I do now because I'm a fan of the industry. So what Jermaine is doing is it's beautiful. What Mama Joy is doing is beautiful. But what I can say is that Jermaine, I think, can channel what he's created with his team of people into a much more broader thing beyond just Sievendelan. Just as the public broadcaster SABC and a platform that has a wider audience reach that might not have the resources to be able to go to pay TV, he could be the catalyst of a platform that actually elevates content on that level and pushes the SABC to be able to put more programs outside of the Sievendelan. Because the thing is that as a content creator, and if you limit yourself to one program, then you're going to have problems, because that program at some point is going to end. And then what?
But Jermaine doesn't mind, because it's what got him here in the first place.
I know.
All he wants is his Sievendelan.
I know.
Bronwyn, let me bring you in here. And I suppose this question around diversification goes back to what you're saying around income and revenue streams, and fans feeling like, we do so much work to help uplift your profile, and maybe it's time we started having a conversation around how we then also start to benefit monetarily from the work that we are doing.
Yes, although I think in this particular case, I think it's important to make this point too, especially in light of what's being said, is that The SABC is a public broadcaster, and we are citizens of South Africa, first and foremost, before we are fans of particular shows that our taxes essentially end up paying for. And I think that Jermaine's issue really does hit on the core of this fandom community, two-way value creation, value sharing conversation. In that, as citizens, we should get some value for our contribution to our states, and as SABC license payers, we should have at least access to things that we want to watch and view. I think that this hopefully will crack open a conversation with the people who do work for us as civil servants. And we have to remember they do work for us, that they should be listening to us as citizens and as viewers and as fans of shows that we are really paying for and funding as citizens of this country. And that perhaps there is room, and we have the tools, we have the technologies, we have the platform. Why can't the SABC listen to someone like Jermaine, or in fact, listen to all viewers of the SABC? Why can't the viewer, through an app, get to vote on where funding is going to go? We know funding is scarce. We know you have to make choices in terms of what is broadcast. But this whole conversation of two-way value creation is that we are part of this community. We as fans, we're part of the community of a show. As citizens, we're part of the community of the states. And we should be listened to. We shouldn't just be passively recipients of decisions that are made by people who are supposed to actually be serving and working with us. So I think these conversations about civil servants and about public enterprises serving us are worthy conversations to have. I think they're important conversations to have ahead of the elections coming up. So I'm sorry for sort of broadening this conversation to a slightly bigger picture, but I think there are mechanisms, and why can't we as viewers, as listeners of radio shows too, why don't we get a say as to which shows get continued or get cancelled? Like, why aren't we asking people? Why are we making assumptions? And this will also help us to make public broadcasters, whether they're radio stations or television stations, more sustainable, because we know that's one of those issues, another one of these big elephants in the room. We know these platforms aren't sustainable. They are running into funding problems. The funding problem is that SABC is not being paying the producers, like we spoke about earlier. Like, we need to make those choices, but hopefully we can make those choices together, and then we make better choices. And that's the whole point of this fandom perspective. It's not just about supporting shows or supporting pop stars or supporting sporting teams. It's about having a say in the things that you contribute to, and about sharing value more fairly across society. I mean, this cuts to the really big issues of society, issues of inequality, issues of equity, issues of justice, and issues really of democracy. So I think this is a very important conversation. I think it's a great example, and thank you so much for inviting us to talk about it today.
Bronwyn, isn't it a bit of a misnomer when it comes to how much of a say fans can have? The one thing that's clear is that when people obviously attach to whether it's a certain individual or show, etc., that becomes niche, right? So you develop a community that is all supporting one thing, whereas broadcasters, by and large, are not just focused on the interests of a small group or maybe even a big group of people, but they have to account across various standards. So, the decisions that I imagine are taken by somebody when deciding what to actually put on air are very different to what maybe a Jermaine would consider. And where does that come in? Because, and we know that relationships are so versatile and can be complex. Sometimes maybe a show doesn't get continued because I had a fight with my manager. But that's not something that people want to go out and speak publicly about.
Yeah, I think the case is that it's not just Jermaine and his fan group that matters. It's everybody else in the country too. It's competing for the same set of resources. That is the airtime in this particular case, right? And the budgeting and the funding. But at the same time, if people do care enough to put petitions together, they probably care more than other people. So those votes do get a bit of weight. They do get platforms on your radio station too to talk about this, because it has a groundswell, because there's momentum, because we know that eyeballs and attention do translate into capital, particularly in the media space. But why aren't we seeing these things as more collaborative, of having not just Jermaine, but other groups that want their shows on, and other fans and other people that have ideas to pitch? Why aren't these more two-way conversations? And I think what's particularly disappointing to me is how the SABC hasn't answered like they could be very honest. They could be much more upfront. But I know this is a big part of this conversation. Is they're not having a conversation. It's a one way. It's now a one way from fans up to the studio rather than from the studio down. So we've kind of closed that circle. But I like conversations. I like more people competing. Competition is good.
All right.
And of course, more voices should be heard. But yeah, let's see what people want.
All right, Bronwyn. Let me go to Howick. Don, good morning. Good morning, Don.
Hi, Hal. You there?
Yes.
Hi, girl. Thanks for an amazing show. And amazing listeners' response as well. You know what's amazing is that if one goes back years gone by, my voice note was a bit long. We go back to old series. Oh, okay, Pop from 70land. We go back in American series. There's so many shows way back. Dallas, for one. Everyone was glued to the TV screens at 7 p.m. Just after the news on a Tuesday night. And those days, it was like, wow, dishes were washed. Everyone was like sorted, and we glued to the TV. There's so many things. Now, when it comes to SABC TV licenses, we know there are millions of people not paying licenses. I know it's getting to use time, so I'm going to make it short and sweet. And, you know, iconic things like Seven Delon. Oh, goodness me. It unfortunately is, you know, what it is. But it's a case of, you know, we can, I don't know, maybe...
Don,
I know what you're saying.
are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I know what you're saying, girl. I know what you're saying. It's just that, you know, okay, news time is just around the corner. Okay, I'll wait till after 11 and I'll give you a call back.
All right. Don might be a fan of the show. Getting a bit of stage fright there. Don out in Howick. I'm looking at the time. We're almost completely done for this conversation. Jermaine, let me perhaps give you the final shot in terms of closing before I come on to our guests. What is it that you would like people to understand and to know about the work that you and your administrators are doing? What is it all in pursuit of?
Okay, I would just like, before I go there, I'd just like to say, I think Phil mentioned that, you know, we shouldn't go based on this conspiratorial theory, but it's not based on conspiratorial theory though. You know, David Makubanya from the SABC mentioned on Morning Live that Afrikaans is part of the problem. It's not like we made it up. And then secondly, I just want to say thank you very much to everyone that is in support of this cause, you know. It's ultimately to save the jobs of those local, our very own local talent and actors and actresses here in South Africa, you know. It's not some Turkish person that has got, you know, that's in a dubbed series somewhere in Johannesburg, but it's actually our very own, you know, and I'm appreciative of the fact that they are still employed, you know. And then it's all in support of our language, my mother tongue, my mother language, you know, Afrikaans, and so many other things such as their jobs that could be saved, you know, simply if the SABC try and get other sources of sponsorship and investors, etc. And I just want to say thank you to Change.org, you know, the people that is managing the petition for me, and my admin team such as Matthew, Joel, Caitlin, and then many other fans. The 44,000 people that signed the petition, I'm immensely grateful.
All right.
And
all right.
yeah, we're
All right,
fighting till the very end.
All right. We wish you all of the very best in that fight. Bronwyn, your parting shot briefly.
Yeah, I just think that in general, maybe we do need to listen a bit more closer to the people who are supporting us, because without them, we lose our position of power, privilege, and the ability to broadcast. So that would just be my parting thought. Yeah, it's all about two-way conversations, not about one-way monologues.
All right, Bronwyn, thanks for that. Phil, you'll have the last word.
Just fans supporting shows and supporting art and supporting our artists. It's a beautiful thing, and I think we should continue doing that. I wish Jermaine all the best, and even if the show ends, I mean, the legacy of the show is still there, and he can still continue to do content around that, and also be the leader in influencing, the decisions that are made around Afrikaans content on the public broadcaster.
The Talking Point with Kathy Motlatlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.